Hey guys, and welcome to a showdown featuring the warriors Papa Palpatine of Clan DBD up against Razel as the warriors of Chaos do march upon River and Maxon to go toe-to-toe with the Wood Elves. Now if you've been wondering how to counter the new Wood Elves the Kholek way, we'll have to wait and see, but I got a feeling it's going to be a lot like Kholek Smash. But let's hop in here and have a quick little look at the builds. So for the forces of Chaos in the front line, we have incredibly cheap but definitely some cheerful warriors, the Chaos Marauders. These guys are happy to have a good old scrap. They're probably pumped up on alcohol from the night before and just want to get to grips with the Wood Elf forces and cut them to ribbons, which is easier said than done up against the elusive Wood Elf forces. In the secondary backup line, we have some more elite infantry. So we have double Chaos Warriors. These guys are a bit mid-tier, but still very potent and deadly. Coming with a whopping 100 armor and silver shields, means they can endure many volleys from the Wood Elf forces. We also have the Mirror Guard, the regiment of renowned Chaos Warriors. Once again, 100 armor and silver shield makes them pretty tanky and durable. Leading the forces, we do have a Chaos Sorcerer of Shadows, coming in with Melkov's Mystifying Miasma, always useful up against the Wood Elves to slow them down and take away their mobility. We also have Enfeebling Foe and Orcum's Mind Razor, and Orcum's Mind Razor combined with Kholek is one of the funniest items in the game. You can make him incredibly powerful, and as for the Kholek himself, the man, the myth, the legend, he's going to be bringing Star Crusher. You pop this and the Mind Razor at the same time, and his weapon strength goes over 1,000. It's just absolutely insane. With a huge cavalry contingent, of course, Mordor Horsemen, looks like 2 over on the right here. There's some units hidden in the trees in the form of Chaos Knights and Chaos Warhounds of Poison. And over in the other trees as well, we have even more Horsemen and Warhounds. Now, Warhounds and Chaos Knights are pivotal here, because the Horsemen are so good at taking down large threats and are skirmishing with the enemy back line. You need them to succeed, but to do that, you have to protect them. So, of course, Chaos Knights and Warhounds do that rather well. Now for the force of the Wood Elves, they do have some Deep Wood Scouts pushed up front. These guys don't have the armor piercing of Way Watchers, but still can skirmish relatively effectively, and they're going to be led by the mighty Orion, the King of the Woods, as he would say. He's coming in, of course, with the Horn of the Wild Hunt, Hounds of Orion, Hawk Talons, and Cloak of Isha. He's one of those characters where all his items and abilities are pretty good and you can take them. We also have a ton of Eternal Guard, so a stalwart line of spears and shields to hold the enemy back. Hidden in the forest, we have a Spellslinger of Life, and we actually have double great Stag Knights. Now, Stag Knights are one of those units which look so incredibly cool, but I'm pretty terrible with them myself. They are the ultimate definition of glass cannon. You thought Wild Riders were glass cannon? Welcome to these Stag Knights. They're heavy cavalry, still incredibly fast for heavy cav, but only 60 armor and silver shields does make them rather squishy, and they are incredibly expensive. They do have 20% physical resistance, however, which can aid them. We have the Wild Hunters of Kurnos, the regiment of renowned Wild Riders. These guys have sometimes been overlooked now because of the Great Stag Knight inclusion. I think these guys are still incredibly good warriors all round. That anti-large really does come into play. And in the far back there, we have one unit of Way Watchers, and it looks like that pretty much sums up the Wood Elf build, so let's get it started. Looks like the Chaos Warhounds instantly going to be putting pressure on the Deep Wood Scouts. The Wild Hunter's going to come and say hello for their troubles, forcing them back at this point. The Wood Elves also want to pull back, and it looks like that's just what they're going to do there. So a good little bit of back and forth skirmishing straight out of the gate. And the problem the Wood Elves are going to have, their archers want to harass the Horsemen where possible and Kholek, but there's so many shielded infantry in a rather wide formation going to be pushing them back. Looks like the Wood Elves, though, are going to be taking the initiative and charging headlong in to the Marauders, who look like managed to just about brace in time. And the Great Stag Knights will then fall back, but a couple of them do get killed by a mighty swing from Kholek. On the other side, it looks like they've probably broken this unit of Chaos Marauders. They have indeed. Some Warhounds have put pressure on. Eternal Guard want to push back and force off the Horsemen down into the trees, allowing the Great Stag Knights to escape. But a well-placed Melkov's Mystifying Miasma, plus the poison of the Chaos Warhounds, is slowing down those Stag Knights. And in the back lines, the trap is sprung, with Hounds and Knights darting straight into the Deepwood Scouts and Way Watchers, but in comes a fat Earthblood and the double Great Stag Knights, also one and the Wild Hunters, and all of a sudden these Chaos Knights are in huge trouble. They do not want to go toe-to-toe with the Wild Hunters. They will butcher them to the last Chaos Warrior. Chaos Warhounds are slowly getting shut down in the back line. Orion went to tussle with the mighty Kholek, but with Star Crusher and Mind Razor popped, 1,013 weapon strength. Even Orion, who's incredibly tanky because the Cloak of Isha, does not want to mess with Kholek, who is just slamming it down that mighty hammer onto the skull of the demigod. And Orion could die here if There's good micro here by the Chaos, and just keep hunting him down, keep putting pressure on. Maybe they can kill him, but it looks like he is going to be getting a nice big regrowth, keeping him in the game. Kholek decides to go after the great Stag Knights. A huge let-off there for the Wood Elves, who nearly lost their Lord, but great pressure from the Chaos. Great Stag Knights and Wild Hunters are roaming free over on this left-hand side. They're going to be pouncing upon the Chaos Warriors, butchering them relatively easily, although it looks like Eternal Guard were hit by Melkovs. In the back line, Eternal Guard trying desperately to pull down some Warhounds, and at least they are wasting, I suppose, the ammunition on some of these horsemen, but they have plenty to spare. In the main battle line, of course, the Chaos will be able to overwhelm the Elvish front line here. Just far more elite troops on the Chaos behalf. And yeah, these Eternal Guard are just getting slaughtered, surrounded, and butchered. Where is Orion? Where is the King of the Woods? We need his aid. Orion is over here, and he's healed up quite nicely. Does need to put some pressure onto Kholek, now that Mind Razor and Star Crusher are offline. Great Stag Knights as well, trying their best to cycle charge and get some decent value. Looks like they are going to be falling back through the trees here to hunt down some Marauders and help save the Way Watchers and Deepwood Scouts, which is some good play there, because he's certainly going to need that range pressure in the late game. Wild Hunters of Kurnos do come charging in, but they take the charge from Kholek, and this is a problem I've been noticing all game for the Wood Elves. They get a good charge, then they get counter-punched very effectively by the mythical Kholek. Mind Razor has gone down. It looks like we have the Hawk's Talons coming down, doing some decent work on the Chaos Warriors. But then comes the Mind Razor, as once again he does try to hunt down Orion, and he will do huge damage here. We can see the Mirror Guard as well coming into the fray, forcing off the Wild Riders, who are desperately trying to retreat where possible. The Spellsong of Life going for more of a Leroy Jenkins approach, however, and charging headlong into the fray. Great Stag Knights have managed to catch some of the horsemen here, which is really bad news for the Chaos. As you can see, there is just so many dead horses on the ground, those mighty antlers skewering the evil men of Chaos. Although there's a ton of horsemen here who are now going to fire into the rather squishy Great Stags, getting some fantastic value. Spellsong of Life trying to go toe-to-toe up against the enemy caster, but I'm afraid this is no movie Spellsinger. The good guys do not always win their glorious challenges, and instead is going to get forced off. Power Stone has been popped though, and she should be able to get to relative safety. Now this is a good chance here. Ryan did manage to drag Kholek into the trees, and of course as a large creature, he's not going to be a big fan of nasty trees. It slows him down, mucks up his attack animations, where Orion thrives here. So it would be a good chance for him and the Wild Hunters to pop on them, but it looks like they're busy shutting down Chaos Marauders and Warhounds, protecting the Way Watchers. There is still 27 models here on these guys, so that's some pretty huge damage they can do to Kholek if Orion can pin him in place. We have an overarching view of the battlefield. You can see the Wood Elves have been pushed deeper and deeper into their own deployment zone, and all of their units which have pushed out wide are now slowly being dragged down. But the speed of the Great Stag Knights really coming into play, allowing them to catch and tussle with a lot of these Chaos units. These guys up to 60 kills, which is pretty impressive stuff. Looks like the Warhounds have been dealt with as well. But in comes Kholek to say hello, and the Horsemen starting to run out of ammunition at this point. Firing in the trees is not perfect for them. Yes, they'll pass through the first few trees, but the deeper they get into the woods, the more they'll struggle. And in come the Great Stag Knights, blitzing their way through the forest, antlers down, ready to welcome the Horsemen to their doom. But then they unfortunately have to fall back because Kholek is here. Good presence by him. Looks like Eternal Guard have been dealt with. And is this a Spellsong? Nope, just more Eternal Guard. The Spellsong of Life is still alive and happy. Going to be healing up the Wild Hunters of Kurnos, who have been very impressive all game. They've been, getting into some tough engagements with Kholek as well, but made some decent damage value back, and nearly 10,000 damage dealt. Still kicking with 21 models. Orion as well does have his mighty javelin he's consistently thrown in, trying to take down the enemy cavalry. Great Stag Knights going to be darting their way back across the battlefield, bounding across the open plains, and it looks like he has kind of abandoned his Way Watchers here, which I think is a big mistake. There's still a ton of Chaos Infantry, however, and this is starting to look a little bit rough here for the forces of the Elves. These Way Watchers and Deepwood Scouts need to fire every single shot into Kholek. He is pretty much untouched at the moment. He has no way of healing, so doing damage to him, of course, is always good, even if it's only tiny little bits of damage, but he's dueled Orion a couple of times and taken basically no damage, and here we can see the Way Watchers are just going to be sacrificed to the Chaos Gods. Not a good day for them whatsoever. Spellsong of Life and Great Stag Knights could put pressure on the Chaos Sorcerer, but they know they are needed here in the main engagement. And it looks like Kholek is going to be duking back and forth before once again counter-charging in on top of the Wood Elves. Really nicely done stuff so far by the Chaos player, whipping in and getting some pretty big damage. And every single big swing of that hammer, you can see there's going to be a dead little elf somewhere down behind. Great Stag Knights with the Horn of the Wild Hunt pop do charge in, and the infantry is not too much of a concern for the Elvish forces. If Kholek wasn't here, effective cycle charging would allow them to do some pretty big burst damage and whittle them down at range. But because Kholek's presence on the battlefield is so strong, the cavalry is really starting to struggle. Wild Hunter's bounding away, but look at that beast stomping his way across the battlefield. Once again, the Spellslinger of Life thinking they've got what it takes to duel the Chaos Sorcerer, but if you have a little look here at the armor, Spellslinger of Life 15, 90 for the Chaos Sorcerer. He's still a warrior at heart, whereas the Spellslinger, not so much. Wild Hunters of Kurnos do get a lovely charge into the Horsemen, but it looks like they're actually pinned in place. It was a trap, as the Horsemen do manage to pin them in, allow Kholek to come in here with Star Crusher, slaughtering the terrified Wild Hunters down to the last man, and that is going to be game. It is just the unbreakable Orion standing his ground. Now, in a one-in-one engagement, Orion actually fares relatively well up against Kholek if the Cloak of Isha gets a little bit lucky for him. However, with that Mind Razor popped at different points, we have Enfeebling Foes active as well. Orion really stands no chance whatsoever, as the mighty demigod stands before the true god of all Dragon Ogre Shagoffs. And yeah, Orion not going to have the best day, completely surrounded by enemies as the forces of chaos pour in from all angles. And one last blow of the horn sounds in the deep as Orion collapses down to the ground. So very well played by both players. We're going to fast forward that a little bit there as Orion does die. And a Pyrrhic victory for sure. The Forces of Chaos took pretty considerable casualties all round. They lost 626 troops, but still having a decent amount at the end. Very well played to Palpatine and Razel. Before we do a little bit of breakdown, guys, if you did enjoy, feel free to give the video a big old thumbs up. It super helps push it out to more people and lets me know that you're enjoying the content. Also, feel free to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We do Total War Warhammer content pretty much every single day. And yeah, it's really cool stuff. You can also hit that bell icon as well if you want to be notified when my videos are going out, if YouTube behaves itself, which, you know, is a bit here and there. If you'd like to see your replays up on the channel, feel free to join my Discord. There is a link down below in the description. You can submit replays there. I do get a lot of replays, so do not lose heart. If yours doesn't get cast, simply send in a couple more, and I'm sure you will get there. Awesome stuff. So, for the forces here, Orion still managed to get 103 kills, despite the fact he took that initial beating, and that's down to good play by Razel, pulling him back, healing him up, and keeping him alive and in the action. And all round, it was a really fun, dramatic build. Just cheap front line to hold the enemy back, and then glorious cavalry charges coming in. Now, the problem with the Great Stag Knights is they're not the best at taking on enemy cavalry. They are, you know, okay in that regard, but they don't fare too well all the time. They're very good here for pulling apart enemy infantry. Unfortunately, enemy infantry tends to be relatively cheap up against the forces of the Wood Elves because you're attempting to swarm them and get into the back lines as much as possible. So they don't get the most damage of value all round. It's pretty decent stuff and some huge damage dealt, but they are incredibly expensive units. So unfortunately, not really paying for themselves, despite good micromanagement by Razel. And I still think they are good units. I just think in some matchups you, can't really use them as effectively. The Wild Hunters of Kurnos faring slightly better. That anti-large coming in rather handily. Unfortunately, the Waywatchers and the Deepwood Scouts really didn't get any value whatsoever. I would... it's kind of tough to say because Deepwood Scouts are pretty good at hunting down the Horsemen and so forth. But yeah, the Waywatchers needed a little bit more protection in the late game. However, that's far easier said than done, especially when you're coming up against a Chaos Pro such as Palpatine. Kholek doing some massive damage and damage value across the board. And the crazy thing about this is he's pretty much full health. He's lost barely anything up here. So he's got so much more impact to the battlefield he could possess if the battle did go on longer. So a wonderful display by Kholek. As well, the Chaos also doing some pretty decent damage. Marauders, of course, just there to help chew through the enemy, but they did get cycle charge down rather effectively. However, the Chaos Knights and Horsemen all fared slightly better, or at least for the most part, as well as the Warhounds. A couple of them getting shut down by really good backline protection from the Great Stag Knights, but other ones feasting quite happily and even gaining a chevron. So guys, hope you did enjoy. If you want to support the channel in any way, feel free to check down below in the description. There's links to my Patreon, and you can become a member of the YouTube channel, which will allow you to become a Royal Duck Guard, which means you will get invited to special events, and you get some cool little icons and emojis on live streams, all that good stuff. But guys, until next time, peace, peace, and as always, stay awesome.